Can you see my screen, or is it?
I can see.
Yes, we see your screen, Mustafa.
Okay. I cannot see. Okay. Euzu billahi mineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Velhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve salatu ve selamu ala seyyidina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. If I can become the co-host, I can share my screen maybe. If my screen share has dropped. Inshallah, today we will discuss the remaining, not all the rest, of course, but we will pick up from where we have left last time in terms of the divine oneness. And within that, basically, we have been discussing the phrase, the sentence that has been related in the hadith. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu yuhyi wa yumit wa huwa hayyun la yamut biyadihi al-khayr wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir wa ilayhi al-masir. And last time we had discussed an introduction to that, which we basically can summarize as a good summary of both divine oneness and also somewhat of the Risale-i Nur and its concept with having the faith and belief in one God, giving us the ability to enjoy this life as well, like it does for the hereafter. And then we have started and covered the two parts, two words two phrases within that sentence. One is La ilaha illallah, and the other is Wahdahu. And we have read through and discussed to some extent these two concepts, how they are different. And then we have left in the La Sharika Lah, he has no partner. What I'll try to do, inshallah, is going to be to read through 1, 2, and 3, as I think they might have some relationship with each other. And then, of course, there are these good news in each one of them. But these phrases are also somewhat similar in the sense that La ilaha illallah is there is no God but Allah. He's one, wahdahu, right? And then he has no partner, la sharika lah. And then we can, inshallah, have a more clear understanding on the nuances, the subtle differences between the three phrases, but also what type of different facets and aspects that they have, they clarify for us in our understanding of divine oneness. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The first phrase, La ilaha illallah. This phrase conveys the following good news to the human spirit, suffering as it does countless needs and the attacks of innumerable enemies. On the one hand, the spirit finds a place of recourse, a source of help, through which is open to it the door of a treasury of mercy that will guarantee all its needs, while on the other it finds a support and source of strength, for the phrase makes known its creator and true object of worship, who possesses the absolute power to secure it from the evil of all its enemies. It shows its master and who it is that owns it. Through pointing this out, the phrase saves the heart from utter desolation and the spirit from aching sorrow. It ensures an eternal joy, a perpetual happiness. The second phrase, Wahdahu, he is one. This phrase announces the following good news, which is both healing and a source of happiness. Man's spirit and heart, which are connected to most of the creatures in the universe and are almost overwhelmed in misery and confusion on account of this connection, find in the phrase, he is one, Wahdahu, a refuge and protector that will deliver them from all the confusion and bewilderment. That is to say, it is as if he is one, Wahdahu, is saying to man, God is one. Do not wear yourself out having recourse to other things. Do not demean yourself and feel indebted to them. Do not flatter them and fawn on them and humiliate yourself. Do not follow them and make things difficult for yourself. Do not fear them and tremble before them. For the monarch of the universe is one. The key to all things is within his divinity and in his sovereignty. Allah has no partner. He is one and cannot be many. So too, he has no partner in his dominicality, his rububiyah, and his lordship, his rububiyah, and in his actions, and in his creating. It sometimes happens that a monarch is one having no partner in his sovereignty, but in the execution of his affairs, his officials act as his partners. They prevent everyone from entering his presence, saying, "Apply to us." However, Allah Almighty, the monarch of pre-eternity and post-eternity, has no partner in his sovereignty, just as he has no need for partners or helpers in the execution of his dominicality. If it were not for his command and will, his strength and power, not a single thing could interfere with another. Everyone can have recourse to him directly. Since he has no partner or helper, no one seeking recourse can be told, "Stop, it is forbidden to enter his presence." This phrase, therefore, delivers the following joyful announcement to the human spirit. The human spirit which has attained to faith may, without let or hindrance, opposition or interference, in any state, for any wish, at any time, and in any place, enter the presence of the all-beauteous and glorious One, the One of power and perfection, who is the eternal and post-eternal owner of the treasuries of mercy, the treasuries of bliss, and may present its needs. Discovering his mercy and relying on his power, it will find perfect ease and happiness. So inshallah, I'll stop here. Again, as I alluded in the beginning, these are three phrases that are similar in one sense, right? Pointing to the oneness of the Creator. One is La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God. The second is He is one, wahdahu. And third is La sharika la, He has no partner. But different aspects, I think, were discussed here. So my first, I think, question will be what type of differences we should understand out of these. And then, of course, any reflections on especially the third phrase, inshallah, I'll get from both Kolnojam or Harnabi, whoever would like to jump in first. Maybe I'll point at Harnabi first.
I was waiting for Colin Hocam to chime in.
Okay.
The question you asked, Mustafa, Assalamu alaikum, by the way, to everyone. Have a good day, joyful day. It's a tough question, and I always ask this type of questions when I read Risale-i Nur in general. And, you know, most of the time, I have no definite answer like this one. But of course, I can just very superficially, or the first things that come to my mind with respect to comparison of these three. So the first one, I think, concentrates on ajz and faqr, as we discussed. I want to see this treatise in the first place corresponding to some of our faculties, individual faculties in the first place. So from this perspective, I think the first word corresponds to ajz and faqr, side of us, condition of us. The second one is side of us, or faculties that want to, you know, individually grasp what's going on in the universe, you know, from particulars to generals. But they're all suffocated if they cannot unite everything, connect all the dots to make sense of a general meaning. So that's with individual faculties, to my understanding. And the third one, actually, the keywords I find is with the names of Allah mentioned here, especially at the last. It says Cemil Zülcelal, Kadir Zülkemal. So it looks like this is again corresponding to our faculties, I think this is our search for beauty and perfection, my two keywords. So beauty side is related with Cemil-i Zülcelal, and perfection side is Kadir-i Zülkemal. Because in everything we do in daily life, actually, we complain, and we are right to complain, because we see things are not at their perfect level. Like how I am treated in my profession, let's say, I don't feel it's 100% fair, let's say. So because I want it to be better, I feel that it should be more just, you know, more beautiful to say. So this is, and again, all the faculties of mine searching for more beauty and more perfection. That's what I understand. I mean, if I'm to compare.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. No, it's great to, because it is at the end of the day connected to human spirit, and you, I think, summarized it pretty well in terms of how what facets and aspects of human spirit are being affected by each meaning. The other thing I kind of noticed, and I'll ask about that to Kolnoja as well, is that especially between the second phrase and the third phrase, he is one. I mean, there is, as you said, Harun, there is that confusion and bewilderment, and there is one, and I think as an object of worship, maybe. But in the second one, I think there is some emphasis I've seen as the execution of his affairs. There are no helpers. Like he's also one, like uluhiyya versus rububiyya maybe is one thing. Can we draw that as a distinction between especially these last two? Or any other thoughts, Kolnajam, that you would like to share?
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum, by the way.
Salam.
I've been thinking quite a lot about the aspect of idolatry here, and la ilaha illallah, of course, ilah. We are created, we are hardwired to worship Allah. We are hardwired to be God aware. But with the hubut, with the fall of humankind, there is also the possibility of being God averse. In other words, instead of God awareness, we choose God avoidance. And, you know, the less God aware we are, the more God averse we become, and also vice versa. It's not that you can be a bit God aware and a bit God averse. These things are part of the same spectrum. So the further along you are on, you know, God awareness, the less God averse you will be. What does this mean practically? It means that if we are unregenerated, in other words, if we are unbelievers, then we will worship. We will definitely worship. But instead of worshiping the true single one source of all existence, we will worship other beings. We will inflate other beings and we will make gods out of them, because we have that hardwired desire to do two things basically. And I think we are oriented towards mulk and towards malakut. And I think that Harun has also alluded to this, because in that last description of the Jamal and the Jalal, I think that we are oriented towards how can I say, material things and corporeal things in order to find a sense of fullness, in order to assuage our anxiety over being insecure, to secure our material benefits. Now, if we are believers, we do this in a very benign way, as stewards of the creation. We are there to take care of the creation with God's sanction. But if we are unbelievers, instead of taking care of the creation, we try to control and dominate the creation in order to gain power and control, in order to get rid of this awful feeling of insecurity that we have, and in order to gain self-autonomy. And we are also at the same time, we are oriented towards the malakut, in other words, the immaterial. Now, if we are believers, obviously that means dependence on God, and it means acknowledgement of that dependence, acknowledgement of our impotence, acknowledgement of our poverty. But if again we are God averse and we are unbelievers, then that dependence, unfortunately, will be over dependence on material things, over dependence on the creation, and also because it's towards malakut, a search for meaning, but within the creation itself, rather than anything transcending the creation. So that means depending on ideologies, depending on maybe socio-political currents, depending on ideas, depending on other people, in an idolatrous sense, depending on false religions, quasi-religions, you name it. So we're oriented towards mulk and malakut, and if we are believers, then that manifests as something that is benign, and if we are not believers, then it will manifest as idolatry, and not idolatry that's on the margins, but every single aspect of life will have an idolatrous aspect. Now, if we are believers, it's also difficult to avoid, as we know, shirk khafi, because most people, first of all, don't believe, and of those who do believe, and this is a Quranic verse, they believe only by also believing in causes, also believing in idols. And therefore, this third one, he has no partner, really is disavowing the ability of any other thing in creation to command our sense of worship, our sense of reverence. And therefore, we as believers, the danger for us is henotheism. Now, that's polytheism is a badly translated word for shirk, but actually henotheism means believing in one overall God, one transcendent God, and then lots of minor gods as well. And basically that is the danger for believers more than anything else. But just to put it in a nutshell, I see these three phrases as indications of the extent to which we engage with our own either God awareness or God avoidance. So it's all about these two things.
No, yeah, that's a great summary, and it was really interesting that phrase. I hadn't heard of that henotheism, but it is really interesting, right? Like especially with the he has no partner, la sharika lah part, because it looks like, as you said, there are not many objections against one supreme being, in terms of at least the initiation and the creation of the universe. But I think the more tricky part comes into play in the execution of everyday affairs, right? And there, this word, he has no partner, la sharika lah, really hits us, saying that.
Yeah, I mean, we can accept a transcendent God. So on the malakut level, because we need to be gratified, because we believe in the unseen. Everyone believes in the unseen, and so that will gratify our need to understand the unseen. But the seen world, unfortunately, we make a big mistake of giving, of distributing God's names among other creatures. And this is how Shaitan tries to drag us down, from our belief, and tries to muddy our belief and dirty it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Colin Hocam, at this point? I think I'm very much into what you said, with respect to attributing the names of the creator to some worldly creation. Can you just elaborate? I think this is very important. I wonder how this really happens, and I feel like this is very dynamic. Like, even if I don't do it right now, I will be doing it the next second or next hour. So this is very dynamic. So I feel like this is why we always need to repent, whoever we are. We cannot just say that, you know, we are believer, we are strong believer, we are under this and that ordination, so I'm done. We can never say this, I mean, to my particular understanding from what you are saying, because this looks very live and dynamic, and we are subject to doing this level of attributing the names to something worldly every moment, isn't that?
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. With Anna, we have this double-edged sword, you know, and it cuts both ways, because we find in ourselves samples, what Ustad Nursi calls samples of the names. And it's very difficult as we're growing up as human children, it's very difficult to engage with those names, which we are told and taught are part of us. You know, oh, you're such a clever little boy. Oh, you're such a pretty little girl. Oh, you're such a wise little thing. These attributes, it is inculcated in us. It's a kind of brainwashing, and in a sense, it's a fiction that is necessary. We know this. It's a necessary fiction, because if we don't feel that we have some kind of ownership over the names, then we can't make the comparison, you know, that Ustad you know, talks about. He expands on this in Enna Risale so brilliantly. We need to be able to make a comparison. We need to be able to say, well, you know, just as I build my house, then there must be someone who builds this, the edifice of the universe. So what happens is, these samples of names, which are in reality only reflections, we find in ourselves and we internalize them literally, and we believe that we actually possess them. And if we are not disabused of that, if we are not told and taught that actually, you know, this is for a purpose, these are only in you as reflections for a purpose. If we miss that memo, right, as they say, if the memo doesn't arrive and we're not told this and we don't understand this, then we go on through life believing that we are actually owners of our own attributes. And if you own your own attributes, you believe other things own theirs as well. So distributing names to the other creatures is not really something that we do consciously. We grow up believing that this is the de facto state of affairs. We believe that this is the default setting, that everything owns itself, everything has a nature, everything has attributes. You know, everything has certain names and functions, and they are autonomous in this, and they have sovereignty. This is how we have to be at the beginning for a reason, and we have to come away from that way of thinking. But unfortunately, degenerate society and modernity in particular doesn't allow us to do that, or doesn't want us to do that. It wants us to believe that we are truly owners of our own attributes. And so it's very easy to distribute the names. We do it almost unthinkingly.
And coming back to the topic of good news, right? Like, I think what you have just described appears very crushing for the soul, right? Like and because it is like basically described here as like confusion and bewilderment, right? Like who to have recourse to if everything and anything has some level of power and attributes that they own themselves, and it's like distributed like that. Then I think for the soul, it's a pretty crushing thing, and finding one source of power and one source of control, I think, gives that good news, not just for our hereafter, but also, I guess, in this world, right? Is that we find ease and peace and happiness by knowing that there's only one I need to worry about. Really, I don't.
Absolutely. I think it was St. Augustine, I may be wrong, who said that if you want rest, you know, comfort, then rest is in believing in one. If you believe in many, you won't have rest, you will have restlessness, you will be restless. And this fits in with what Ustad is saying, because if you believe in one source, of creation, then it becomes very easy. There's a lot of ease in unity. But as you said, Mustafa, that if you are not worshipping the one, then you will still worship, and you will worship the many. And that is a cause of great consternation and confusion and anxiety and madness, actually. And we
Yeah.
see it, people running about crazily after this fad, after this fashion, after this thing, after that current, after this ideology, and trying to find something to give them rest, to give them to ease their existential anxiety. And it's not going to happen. It's like trying to quench your thirst in the sea. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, and I guess coincidentally, right, the Ustad uses the word "do not follow them" and make things difficult for yourself. It might even imply following them on Twitter, even, right? But yeah, joking aside, I think it is indeed right, like following people, trying to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
to like take on based on the different fads and fashion that is appearing, just to make yourself likable to those false deities, basically, that you assume as
I mean, it can be
power.
anything, can't it? It can be another person, it can be a thought, it can be an idea, it can be a wish, it can be an aspiration, it can be a sport, it can be anything, Idols are many, and some of them are very temporary. We hear that the Sahaba, before they became Muslim, they used to make idols out of sugar, and they used to keep them in their pockets. And whenever they got hungry, they would eat them. So we don't really respect idols at all. We need them because we need to worship. But if we see they're not working for us, we dismiss them. This is why you find that media, they build up these stars, they build up these film stars and these celebrities, but they will knock them down very quickly when they get a little bit tired of them, and then go on to something else, because they will never ever be they will never have rest.
Yeah, because they're not the source. It will confuse them even more, and then when
And
they
they don't
see,
deliver. They don't
yes,
deliver on their promises.
exactly. And there's no anywhere in between, right? Like if they're not gods, they will be just down to the ground, basically. I guess it's Jazmi Abi who shared on the chat a part from Mevlana Jami that is also mentioned in the words. I'll read through that. I think it sums it up pretty well in terms of oneness, divine oneness, and how that is helpful to us. How well, I'll read through the chat now. How well Mevlana Jami expressed it. For his self was kneaded with love and intoxicated with the cup of ardor. Yaki ha, yaki han, yaki hu, yaki bin, yaki dan, yaki gu. And he's going to explain that. That is in Persian. That is, want only one. The rest are not worth wanting. Call one. The others will not come to your assistance. Seek one. The rest are not worth it. See one. The others are not always to be seen. They hide themselves behind the veil of ephemerality. Know one. Knowledge other than that, which assists knowledge of him, is without benefit. Say one. Words not concerning him may be considered meaningless. Yes, Jami, you spoke the truth absolutely. He alone is the true beloved, the true sought one, the true desired one, the true object of worship. So yeah, I think this is a nice sum up of this.
You know what the sad thing is that Yeki Ha, Yeki Khan, Yeki Ju, Yeki Bin, Yeki Dan, Yeki Gu, we all are doing this all the time, and we don't realize it, because then we see double and treble and multiple. We want only the one, and yet we see the one. We are lost in multiplicity. So we have to learn to see transparently, to see through things, through the veil of ephemerality and multiplicity and see the one. Why do we find this so difficult?
And it might digress us, but probably not, is that maybe should we say that maybe it is not really a one-time learning, but something that needs to be refreshed ever again. And this is probably why this phrase is recommended in the hadith to be recited after every Fajr prayer and after every Maghrib prayer 10 times each. Right? Like we are recommended to recite this 20 times per day, one in the beginning and one in the end. It's as if we need to refresh these thoughts because we are always exposed to this multiplicity around us, maybe, and then we need to remind ourselves constantly these to reset. Shall we say that?
Definitely. What does Harun think?
Absolutely. I was going to say, remind us the first word. In the first word, the end of it, Ustad Nursi suggests us reciting zikr, fikr, shukr. I think these three keywords, usually this is understood as in sequence, like at the beginning we do zikr, we remember the creator, then we think about these bounties, everything given to us. That's fikr, and then we appreciate the value of everything we're given. So that's shukr. However, also I understand that this is a bundle, and I think this is the very problem. If we don't take this as a bundle, we just otherwise consequence would be that I will be missing the point. Like if I'm appreciating what I'm given without pondering, just thinking about using my intellect enough, then there will be something missing. And this missing, maybe it is also related with missing the connection between Esmail Husna, concentrating on some but neglecting some others. That will also cause deviation from the reality. And I think here it's part of the reason. Maybe I'm very good at zikr, remembrance, but I neglect, fikr to some extent, and I neglect shukr to another extent. So that's the problem. So I think one solution is really doing everything with this bundle, which is constructed through these three pillars, to say. And if we neglect one of them, some of them, I think it will be another deviation from the reality.
Is that your way of saying that this is a system?
Yes, of course. Again, we are looking from systems.
You can't just do one element in the system. It's the whole system, isn't it? And I think this is the key to unity, because it's all or nothing. It's not this. Going back to this thing about idolatry, people think that idolatry is something that happens occasionally, if you're not a believer. But if you're not a believer, you are, it's wall-to-wall idolatry. Everything will be idolatry, absolutely everything. And if you're a believer and you slip a little bit, then that idolatry will poke its head in, and will come into your worldview. So we shouldn't think that, I'm trying to say it in a very, bad way, badly articulated, but also God awareness is not maybe a system, but it's all or nothing. And if some of it is missing, then it won't be a vacuum. It will be God avoidance, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I had a particular example, such as I'm given a particular shape, and I can appreciate this shape and say, Alhamdulillah, I'm given this shape, this body, to say. But also I need to think about it, like what I'm not given at this particular point. So that, triggers other faculties. And I think that works in a way that supports appreciation, that supports shukr, and also that gives maybe somewhat depthness or more value to zikr as well, to remembrance, because how do I remember the creator? Is the creator just with the name, Father, let's say he just creates by the shape in this style. So if I'm stick with that, I'm just with this name, and I cannot really move forwards. And this also has its particular problems. And I think the way it is connected also, like the Persian from Jami, you just recited, that's knowing one. Like, how do we know one? So through our knowledge profession, if it gives us a way to look at from different angles to many, many, many names and attributes, I think that becomes knowing one. Otherwise, if it is just knowing Father, I think it's not meant here. It's just very collapsed version of, trying to understand, remember the creator. So I feel like the problem arises in this domain somehow.
Yeah. And I think connecting back to the topic and this phrases, right? I think we have been somewhat discussing different attributes of Allah, right? In terms of like La ilaha illallah, wahdahu, he's one. But then when we went into he has no partner, we went a bit more in detail, right? I mean, from his sovereignty, we then went into his lordship and his execution of affairs. And then I think going forward, we will enter into the realm of his dominion, right? Everything belonging to him. And I think these could be some windows to other attributes and names of Allah, because again, in another narration, right, about the same phrase, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah ila akhir, is that it includes Ismi Azam, right, the greatest name. So how does it include? Maybe these could be windows to those different names or types of names, where we will, inshallah, understand as a whole, not just, as you said, one name, but through many names supporting each other and inshallah providing us a more fuller picture.
Yeah, and interesting, Mustafa, also in where was that? It's 24th word, if my memory is not wrong, where also, it's a wonderful piece, right, which talks about beautiful names of Allah. Over there, I think, gives an example about knowing the name Alim, but ignoring Qadir. So over there, it says that if you just concentrate on Alim, but ignore Qadir, then you will be stuck with naturalism. So I think it is pretty relevant here. So I just fall in the shirk of, naturalism if I neglect Qadir while I ponder on Alim, for instance.
I think maybe the key there is to remember that also Ustad talks a lot about constellations. Just as there is a constellation of fixed stars in the sky, and there are also the planets which move through those constellations, there are names which move through other names. So you have the background name, for example, and then you have other names moving through that constellation. And because we know that, variation and difference comes into existence because of the interplay of Jamal and Jalal. We know this. Without Jamal and Jalal interplaying, because they are all of the opposites, apparent opposites, we wouldn't have any variation. And it's not just variation, it's also dynamism, as you said, and flux and constant change. And constant change means the names are constantly manifesting in differing degrees, but also in different configurations and different constellations. I think the way he describes, Buruj, one name in the Burj of another name is absolutely amazing. And I think, as you say, just understanding Alim without understanding Qadir, you're missing something. So I think the constellation idea is important.
Yeah, Hujam, very, very well and beautifully said,
Okay, then maybe moving on to the Lahul Mulk, so that we cover more than one phrase, inshallah, today. And inshallah, this will, I think, is connected. Of course, all these phrases are connected, but I think, I would like to ask you after reading through it, how we can connect them, but also what else we can get out of this in terms of, we talked about names and attributes of Allah and how this might be related to what names and how we should understand, of course, the main piece of this around the good news that this provides to us. So I'll read through the fourth phrase and inshallah we can discuss. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And maybe since this is short, I'll probably read the fifth as well, but let me see. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. His is the dominion, lahul mulk. That is to say, ownership is altogether his. As for you, you are both his property, you are owned by him, and you work in his property. This phrase announces the following joyful and healing news. O man, do not suppose that you own yourself, for you have no control over any of the things that concern you. Such a load would be heavy. Also, you are unable to protect yourself, to avoid disasters, or to do things that you must, in which case, do not suffer pain and torment without reason. The ownership is another's. The owner is both all-powerful and all-merciful. Rely on his power and do not cast aspersions on his mercy. Put grief behind you. Be joyful. Discard your troubles and find serenity. It also says, you love and are connected to the universe, which is the property of the all-powerful and merciful one. Yet, although it grieves you by its wretchedness, the universe's wretchedness, you are unable to put it right. So, hand over the property to its owner. Leave it to him. Attract his pleasure, not his harshness. He is both all-wise and all-merciful. He has free disposal over his property and administers it as he wishes. Whenever you take fright, say like Ibrahim Hakkı, let's see what the master does. Whatever he does, it is best. Understand this thoroughly and do not interfere. And I'll read the fifth phrase, inshallah, since it's short. His is the praise, lahul hamd. Praise, laudation, and acclaim are proper to him, are fitting for him. That is to say, bounties are his. They come from his treasury, and as for the treasury, it is unending. This phrase, therefore, delivers the following good news. O man, do not suffer and sorrow when bounty cease, for the treasury of mercy is inexhaustible. Do not dwell on the fleeting nature of pleasure and cry out with pain, because the fruit of the bounty is the fruit of a boundless mercy. Since its tree is undying, when the fruit finishes, it is replaced by more. If you thankfully think of there being within the pleasure of the bounty a merciful favor 100 times more pleasurable, you will be able to increase the pleasure 100-fold. An apple an august monarch presents to you holds a pleasure superior to that of 100, indeed 1,000 apples. For it is he that has bestowed it on you and made you experience the pleasure of a royal favor. In the same way, through the phrase, his is the praise, lahul hamd, will be open to you the door of a spiritual pleasure 1,000 times sweeter than the bounty itself. For the phrase means to offer praise and thanks, that is to say, to perceive the bestowal of bounty. This, in turn, means to recognize the bestower, which is to reflect on the bestowal of bounty, and so finally to ponder over the favor of his compassion and his continuing to bestow bounties. So inshallah, I'll return back to Lahul Mulk. And I think, again, I think we went into his dominion, right? Like he owns everything. And again, in terms of the good news, that anything that we like is connected, I believe, right, to the other parts, especially like the last one, as we said about there are no partners. So he has control over everything. But I think in addition, should we say the ownership part, I think is also maybe emphasized here. And any reflections on any of that? either from Harun abi or Kulin hocam.
I think we are probably both in agreement, and I'll let Harun continue, that ownership is the big cause of our problems as human beings. Inflated sense of ownership, actually thinking that we own anything, at all, is a problem. And here he says, you are both his property, you're owned by him, and you work in his property. And this goes back to what we were saying about stewardship. We are stewards, we are not owners. We can't do it with it what we wish. But unfortunately, if we don't understand that we don't own, then we try to control everything, and we try to gain as much power and sovereignty as we can.
And also, this is related to perspective, right? We know in this Mesnevi Nuriye, at the beginning of Katre Mukaddime, Said Nursi mentions, he learned, this is one of the things he learned. We had discussed at the place at another meeting, but we know that he mentions Mülk or Lehul Mülk as one of his, top picks from 40 years of life. So, and this is something very strong, very bold, I think. And it's related to perspective, right? Over there, he talks about perspective, nazar. And obviously, the very first sentence here is that we are owned. So this is a perspective. Once I switch to this perspective, how relief it is if I'm really owned by the all-powerful, all-merciful. And I think in this piece, he's again talking about mercy and power, which obviously we need both, right? That's our Ajz and Fakr again. Ajz and Fakr corresponds to Qadir and Rahmet. Fakr requires mercy, and Ajz requires power, obviously. So we are in need of these two pillar names, to say. So at this point, again, so this gives us a perspective, switching the perspective. And once we switch, it's kind of, we just get rid of the burden, because otherwise I try to really take handle of anything. One reflection is I make insurance on anything. I make insurance on my computer, on my health, on my belongings, whatsoever. Try to give warranty to anything that I presume the owning, right? So it drives crazy, actually. It gives anxiety, anything, because if you own something, you need to take care of it. Take care of something requires being powerful and also being maybe merciful. I just wanted to talk about the perspective dimension of this.
It's amazing what you said there. Is it's going to be such a huge burden, and you said that we need mercy and power, and we have neither. And we appear to, because we try to put our own house in order, so they say, as they say. We try to control our own little environment, our own house, and we appear to be able to do that a little bit. But when we see other things in other parts of the world going wrong, we think that we can do something about that as well. And when we can't, we get anxious. And he's saying, look, you're not the owner of the universe. You're part of the universe. You are owned, and the property belongs to one who is absolutely powerful, absolutely merciful, absolutely wise. And if things appear to your limited perspective to be going wrong, you can't put it right anyway. So why are you, tearing yourself in two over, there was a tornado and so many people lost their homes, and okay, you feel empathy because you're a human being. You can't solve these problems, you can't do anything about them. You do as much as you can do, and then that's it. He is al-Wakil. You give it to him. He is al-Kafil. You entrust it to him. This is a brilliant, this is the result of understanding that Lahul Mulk. His admonishments in this short passage here, they're amazing.
Yeah, indeed,
Can I
right?
ask
Like,
a question?
do not cast aspersions on his mercy is really a key point, right? Like about this things that we cannot put it right. You should not really doubt his mercy. So that's powerful. But go ahead, Harnabi, with your question.
I was going to ask the very last sentence. It strikes me in Risale-i Nur in general. It's a very often used quote, right? Like pencerelerden seyret içlerine girme. I think Turkish version is kind of different. It's kind
Correct.
of yeah. So it says just watch through the windows, but do not just get into things, right? It uses this phrase. Colin hocam, if you know the Turkish of it, right? Pencerelerden seyret içlerine girme expression.
For this last sentence.
Yeah, it's been. I think this been paraphrased, hasn't it?
Yeah, it
Correct.
looks like paraphrased.
Yeah.
But if we take it from the original, can you elaborate on this part a little bit? I mean, how are we going to balance like striving for justice, in social realm requires, we need to interfere. But here it suggests us, to look at everything, but don't touch it, something like that. I'm sure it's not the meaning of that, but how to contrast and comprehend on these.
It's very difficult because I think, we all have these inbuilt empathies, and, we have reflections of mercy and compassion. But if we see that we're trying to do things which are not possible for us, then it becomes idolatrous, because you're trying to fix something that you can't fix because you don't have the power. And so you're inflating your own abilities, and because you deep down you can't do it, it's making you anxious, and that shows that the perspective is wrong. You can pray for those who die. What else can you do for people who've died, say, in a plane crash, like today in, I think, Nepal or somewhere in Central Asia, there was a plane crash and a lot of people died. Okay, I can maybe help those who are surviving if I'm there. I can make dua, certainly now, here, thousands of miles away. But if I sit here and, cry and moan and make myself ill over these poor people, these poor people, Allah is Rahim or is Arhamur Rahimin. What do I expect to do myself? Now, this shouldn't be used as an excuse to do nothing. If we can do something, if we can do something, we must do it. It's not, when Ustad says do not interfere, I think what he's saying is don't interfere in things where you have no ability to even act. He's not saying, well, if there are poor people, don't help.
Just watch them and say that Allah Rahmanir Rahim and don't do anything.
Yeah, I think this is tawakkul, not tawakkul. And he admonishes us for that, and he cautions against it. But I don't think that's what he means. Don't try to be more Catholic than the Pope, as they say in English. So don't try to be more Rahim than Allah, because he is Arhamur Rahim.
Yeah. Indeed, a fine balance that we all need to walk through. But yeah, that's our test, I guess. We are in the last 3 minutes, so we probably will cover this His is the praise, Lahul Hamd again next week. But if there are any thoughts either about that or any concluding thoughts about whatever we read so far, I would be happy to get it from either Harun abi or Colin hocam.
Again, I would like to, elaborate some questions maybe to hear from you. It's what I understand through this life, it's a matter of balance, like understanding everything, at the right way. So, I mean, understanding is not enough, we should understand it in what things really mean, what events really talk to me in a way. But again, my question, how to keep this balance? Of course, we are always, there is no universal formula for that, I'm aware, but at least some small habits to follow. You know, there's this famous book recently, Atomic Habits. It's one of the best sellers. And sometimes I like these titles because Atomic Habits, I think it's a very nice title. So the question is, what some atomic habits that would take us to this particular phrase, he is the dominion?
I don't have any answers to that, but I think before we can answer about the atomic, I heard atomic rabbits first, not atomic habits, but before we can answer about atomic habits, I think whenever I hear you speak, I always think systems. And I think systems here is a shorthand for unity. And that is to see divine unity as a unity rather than just as a part of our aqidah. Yes, Allah is one. And then, as you said, Allah is one. Let's now move on. Or yes, it's very bad to have to worship idols, and we shouldn't. You know, these are just platitudes. We have to see Tawhid as a system, as an all-encompassing system. And if you are part of that system, if you key into that system, you key into a whole system, not just a facet, not just a thing that's separated from other things. It's a whole system, as you said, a package, a bundle. We have to start thinking in those terms. We have to start understanding the shape of unbelief. And the shape of unbelief is the shape of idolatry. You know, it's La ilaha illallah. If there is no Allah, then there will be lots of ilahs, you know, multiple ilahs, not just one or two. And the big danger, of course, is that if you believe in Allah and also alongside him, you believe in lots of other idols. So I think we have to start thinking in properly and not just playing with these words and these terms.
Yeah. And it's as if you have read the book, Hocam, because I read the book, The Atomic Habits, and the author does mention that he doesn't believe in goals, he believes in systems.
Oh,
So
really?
I think,
Well, this is why Harun's reading it.
No, I
Surely.
haven't read it from, you know, beginning to the end, you know.
Yeah.
He doesn't
But-
need to read it from beginning to end.
He has a system, but yeah, the system for a believer, I guess, as you said, right, like is like what is outlined here and other parts of the Risale-i Nur, right? It charts a map for a systemic thinking for a believer, and once we have our system in place, I think we can build the habits, you know.
Absolutely.
on top of
And I
that.
think that's what call it as being grounded. And I always now make dua for the person who told me 40 years ago, ground yourself in the Risale-i Nur. And I opposed it heavily. He said, just read Risale. And maybe for me, it wasn't right at that time just to read Risale, but I know now what he means. What I think he means is find a grounding, find a system. And be part of that system, and then you can look at other systems and judge other systems.
And with your word, Hocam, you said shape of unbelief, and as if Risale just draws the shape of belief.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we are 2 minutes over. But yeah, thank you, Jazakallah khair, for the great discussion again this week. Inshallah, we will continue next week where we have left. And with that, Harun Abi, do you want to make a dua or?
This time, Colin Hocam, I did
Okay,
last time.
yes.
Inshallah, Allah, please help us to see things as they really are and not as we just wish them to be. Inshallah.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة.
Thank you, Mustafa.
Thank you all, and inshallah, see you all next week.
Thank you very
Jazakallah
much.
khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.